From the headquarters of Telesur English in Quito, Ecuador, this is From the South, and I am Saini Gray. We begin right here in Ecuador, where the government has decided to expel the Venezuelan ambassador, Carol Delgado. It said this was in response to what it called offensive statements about President Lenin Moreno by Venezuela's communications minister. In a statement issued by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Human Mobility, the government says it will not tolerate any disrespect towards its authorities, while it said Ecuador will continue to provide assistance to Venezuelan migrants entering the country. The first group of Honduran migrants has already arrived at the Guatemalan border with Mexico. Thousands more are still making their way across Guatemala on their way to the United States. The migrant caravan set off from Honduras last weekend.
Honduran migrants are trying to reach the capital of Guatemala to continue their journey to Mexico and the United States. Some have opted to get on trailers, since their fatigue is obvious. Despite that, they say they are not going back to their country.
We
are not going back, and I am not a leader. I am the people, and for the people, if I die, I die, and if we have to fight, we will have to fight.
The conditions in which they're making this journey are not ideal. Overcrowding in trucks and the high temperature of the eastern region of the country has led the Ombudsman for Human Rights to demand controls from the Civil National Police to avoid children being taken in this kind of transport. Those who had begun the journey by truck now have to walk again.
It is a very complicated situation because the number of Honduran people that are passing through Guatemalan territory is high. They have the purpose to reach as soon as possible to the border with Mexico, and therefore they are seeking the way to transport them in a more agile way. The situation is that we know for a fact that some people have suffered accidents or harm when they get into the trucks.
It's clear that a large number of Hondurans have chosen to stay on the caravan and walk thousands of kilometers to the Guatemalan capital. This mother with her 3 children says that the wish to have a job is what keeps her going, and says her goal is to reach the United States.
I left my country because I don't have a job and I have 3 children. I'm living with the idea of moving forward because I am alone with them. I wish that they let us pass. My idea is to go to work to move forward with my children.
Hundreds have already arrived in the capital and others are arriving at the border with Mexico, all with a clear goal of leaving their country, which they say has denied them the possibility of a better quality of life.
Our correspondent Gilda Silva-Strucci was with one of the groups of migrants as they set off from the Guatemalan capital.
We are in the avenue in Guatemala City. This caravan of migrants set off from their shelter at 4:30 in the morning. Behind me is a small group of them. Many others set off in vehicles heading for the border with Mexico. As you can see, most of them are young. Further back, there are women with children as well as the elderly. As I say, many have taken rides because the distance to the frontier is more than 200 kilometers. That's about 5-hour drive, which is why they left early because they had a long day ahead of them.
The caravan is now split into several parts. On Wednesday, another group of 500 Hondurans arrived at the border with El Salvador by taking a different route on their way to the United States. Our correspondent Ernesto Alvalos has more.
Autoridades migratorias de El Salvador informaron que la tarde...
El Salvador's migration authorities have reported that late Wednesday, some 500 Hondurans arrived at the border. They were coming from the southernmost departments of Honduras, with the intention of crossing Salvadoran territory on their way to the United States. This makes the second caravan from Honduras to head towards the United States. Migration authorities have said that those who meet the migration requirements of El Salvador will have free access to the country. At the same time, those who do not carry the proper legal documents will not be able to pass through the Salvadoran border. But over the last few hours, we have heard from organization of the Jesuit Church, which is not in agreement with this policy of Donald Trump, which has threatened to remove aid from countries of the Northern Triangle, Guatemala, Honduras, and El Salvador. This enlarges the crisis which began with the migration of Hondurans, whose need to live stems from the economic crisis as well as the violence in their country.
And a few hours ago, U.S. President Donald Trump again threatened Honduras, Guatemala, and El Salvador over the migrant caravan. Trump took to Twitter to warn that if Mexico doesn't control the situation, he will send the U.S. military to the southern border to stop the caravan of migrants. He also said he is cutting all funds to those countries, and he accused the migrants of being criminals. The Guatemalan president has reacted to his U.S. counterpart's threats to cut off aid to Central American countries if they don't stop the caravan.
With the United States and with every other country in the world, with me in government, we have maintained exchanges at the level at which countries should have them. No aid should be conditional. No aid should be demanded.
The Workers' Party candidate Fernando Haddad has met with leaders of Brazil's evangelical churches with just 1 week and a half to go before the runoff election. In the meeting, he said there are contradictions between religious values and the violence that Bolsonaro defends. Brazil is a mainly Catholic country, but evangelicals have grown rapidly in recent years.
It's not about options, but the need today to take position democratically in this electoral process. What's at stake is not simply a party. It's not that. What's at stake is the issue of the Brazilian democracy.
And Bolsonaro supporters have murdered a trans woman in Sao Paulo. Last Tuesday, a group of male supporters of the right-wing candidate killed the woman in the center of the city. They stabbed her while shouting "Bolsonaro, yes him," as a response to the political and feminist LA Now demonstrations. In the 10 days since the election, there have been 50 violent attacks across 18 states in Brazil. And at a concert in the Brazilian state of Bahia, Roger Waters, the founder of the rock band Pink Floyd, has paid tribute to the capoeira master who was murdered by a supporter of Jair Bolsonaro.
I wanted to just pause for a moment to remember one of your own. This is a local great artist. Master who, as you all know, was brutally murdered in the wake of the recent first round of your presidential elections. He was a great example to all of us in spreading love and humanity and empathy and courage.
A court in Sao Paulo has overturned a conviction for torture and murder against one of the most prolific murderers under the military dictatorship of the 1970s. The ruling is seen as a worrying precedent, as the leading candidate in the current presidential race has himself spoken in favor of torture and praised military rule.
The Sao Paulo Court of Justice decided that the statute of limitation does apply to the crime committed by Colonel Brilhante Ustra during the military dictatorship. He was responsible for the torture and murder of the journalist Luis Eduardo Merlino in 1971. The victim's family has been seeking justice for 47 years.
The court is very conservative, but I believe that they are also affected by the conservative wave that is now sweeping Brazil today, and which serves those who defend torture.
In addition, the court didn't find evidence that Ustra took part in the crime committed at the Military Intelligence Center, a notorious torture site which he commanded. The judgment contradicts the early ruling of a lower court and hundreds of testimonies given to the Truth Commission, like that of Eleonora Menicucci, who was also tortured.
It is terrifying in terms of truth, memory, and democracy. In Brazil, we are in a fight between civilization and barbarism.
After the first court ruling, the case was shelved for 6 years, and Ustra died a free man. With just days to go before the presidential runoff, this court decided in favor of the men who Jair Bolsonaro praised during the impeachment of Dilma Rousseff. She was also tortured by Coronel Ustra, and as president, she set up Brazil's Truth Commission.
According to all the human rights treaties that Brazil signed and ratified, the crime of torture is subject to a ruling of the Inter-American Court of Human Rights, which doesn't accept self-amnesty. So the statute of limitations does not apply to torture and murder.
In the current climate of political violence in Brazil, the court's decision to grant impunity to someone recognized as the military dictatorship worst killer has caused surprise and shock.
The former coordinator of Brazil's Truth Commission says that if the right-wing candidate Jair Bolsonaro comes to power, his government is likely to include more military officers than even those of the military dictatorship.
There was continuity here in Brazil. There was no break from the previous authoritarian regime, or with the instruments of the authoritarian regime, nor with its authors, accomplices, or participants. These people have remained in politics. They have put on other masks, but they continue to hold onto the reins of power.
We'll take a short break now. More news after this.
An occasion to enjoy the cultural diversity that defines our South American essence. Come along to find out the story behind these personalities, traditions, and artistic expressions that unite us as a whole. Real Lives, Friday, only on Telesur.
Welcome back. 2 people were shot dead in Haiti on Wednesday during protests after a ceremony for the anniversary of the death of Jean-Jacques Dessalines. Tens of thousands of people protested to demand an investigation into an oil corruption scandal. Police officers are said to have fired live ammunition as protesters threw rocks. Social movements and political organizations want the authorities to be held responsible for the corruption. Prime Minister Jean-Henri Seyon has called on people to remain calm. Among those calling for the return of the squandered funds to the people is the leftist intellectual and activist Camille Chalmers, who said he recognized the solidarity and contributions by socialist countries.
We are welcoming the alternative cooperation created by the socialist spirit of Hugo Chávez Frías and Fidel Castro. This socialist cooperation is what must dominate relations between countries. We are applauding the solidary socialist cooperation, and at the same time we are condemning the bad use of fundings and the Haitian oligarchy, which has appropriated a big part of those funds, rather than for the state to use for the benefit of the population.
We are here to demand that President Jovenel Moise return the money from the Petrocaribe Fund. We are suffering too much. We can't eat. Kids can't go to school. Jovenel has to leave power, no matter what.
We don't agree with violence, but I'm also not against the people out here protesting to demand justice. They're not just in the street over the Petrocaribe issue. They're also out here to say the cost of living is too high. The cost of things we need most are too high.
The Peruvian opposition leader Keiko Fujimori has been released from jail. After a week under arrest, a court overturned her detention. She was accused by prosecutors of receiving money from the Brazilian construction firm Odebrecht for her election campaign in 2011. Peruvians have taken to the streets again to reject corruption in the political and judicial systems.
Every day a new case of corruption, and people are fed up. As Peruvians gathered for another protest, news came through that the leader of the white-collar criminal gang and former judge Cesar Nostroza had escaped from the country.
It's totally despicable. The whole political system is responsible, and it starts with the leaders of the Congress. They didn't do what was needed for the Ministry of Justice to be able to act.
He has made a mockery of us. He has been protected by the police chief, Jorge Chavez, as well as by the Congress and the justice system.
This is just one of the reasons why Peruvians took to the streets again. They are also rejecting a series of arbitrary decisions by the Congress. Among them, the law that lets the dictator Alberto Fujimori and other human rights abusers go free.
We will not let him walk free for the murder of our relatives. He has to go back jail and serve his 25 years. He is pretending to be sick, that he is dying, but God is great and he will have his punishment.
The demonstrators say that instead of legislating in favor of the country, Congress has turned into a cover for those accused of corruption. Among them, the public prosecutor Pedro Chaverri and pro-Fujimori congressmen and their allies.
It has become a gangster institution. It just serves the powerful, never the people.
They are passing laws to protect criminals. There are parties like Popular Force, APRA, just protecting corrupt judges.
We asked the president to close Congress immediately.
The protest was not only directed at Congress. Peruvians also want the justice system to punish severely the politicians and former presidents accused of corruption.
Several application-based delivery riders have teamed up in Argentina to form a new trade union. They want their employment status to be formalized in law. There are over 100,000 Argentinians working as riders, but they're not eligible for certain rights that cover accidents at work, health benefits, and retirement plans. Officials from the Provisional Riders Trade Union have already met with lawmakers to set up basic employment standards. This initiative is the first of its kind in Latin America. The Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development has blacklisted 8 Caribbean countries. They have been flagged by the organization as operating high-risk schemes that sell residency or citizenship. Citizenship by investment schemes allow foreign individuals to obtain citizenship or residency rights on the basis of local investments or against a flat fee. The organization says the scheme can be used to hide assets offshore. Prison officers in Trinidad are vowing to walk off the job in response to the shooting death of yet another prison officer. The Prison Officers Association President, Saron Richards, says he and his men are prepared to leave the nation's prisons unmanned. 5 prison officers have been murdered in Trinidad for the year so far. World News is next. Stay with us.
With developing events being presented through analysis. Our coverage transcends borders. With renowned journalist Walter Martinez.
Salud amigos, tripulantes de nuestra querida, contaminada y única nave espacial.
Dossier. Weekdays. Only on Telesur.
Y ponga usted las cámaras, señor director.
Welcome back. Russian President Vladimir Putin has said that the Islamic State has taken nearly 700 hostages in Syria. Putin said IS has issued their demands with an ultimatum to shoot 10 people daily if it's not fulfilled. He also said that mainly Syrian families were taken, but also several U.S. and European citizens. He didn't share any details about the militants' demands, but said they are expanding their control into U.S.-backed territories.
This territory is under patronage of our American partners. They rely on Kurdish armed units there, but they did not finish their job. There are ISIS members remaining in several places, and they have started to broaden their presence recently. They have seized around 30 families, which is almost 700 people taken hostage.
The Turkish newspaper Yeni Safak has said they have access to the audio clip that reveals how the journalist Jamal Khashoggi was tortured and beheaded in the Saudi consulate in Istanbul. The newspaper also says that in the clip they can hear the Saudi Consul General Mohammed Al-Otabi's voice asking the hit squad to take whatever they were doing to the journalists outside the consulate. While another Turkish newspaper, Harriet Daily News, is reporting that one of the members of the 50-man death squad has died in Riyadh in a mysterious road accident. Several women's rights groups have marched across the Liberian capital of Monrovia, calling for justice and protection for girls allegedly sexually abused by a charity worker. Protesters delivered a petition to several ministries demanding action following the publication of a documentary by ProPublica. The film reveals how the late co-founder of the U.S. charity More Than Me Foundation, Macintosh Johnson, raped girls in a school opened to save them from sexual exploitation in Monrovia. The Liberian vice president is demanding an investigation. British Prime Minister Theresa May has confirmed that she is considering extending the transition period after Brexit for up to a year. She made the announcement after she failed to reach an agreement with the European Union leaders in Brussels. Conservative MPs and Brexit campaigners are not happy with the idea of extending the period, as it would give the EU more leverage in the negotiations. Britain is due to leave the EU in March, and the transition period is set to run until December 2020. The number of people killed in an attack on a college in Crimea has risen to 20 after a female student died of her injuries. People paid respects to the victims by laying flowers and candles in the city of Quraysh. Investigators identified the attacker as an 18-year-old student at the college. He apparently set off a bomb in the cafeteria and then started shooting at random. He killed himself afterwards. And now let's take a look at some of the other stories making headlines around the world.
The Bulgarian man suspected of the rape and murder of TV journalist Victoria Marinova was extradited from Germany on Wednesday. The 20-year-old suspect, named as Severin Krashimirov, arrived at the airport in the capital Sofia and was transferred to police detention. There, his fingerprints will be taken and he will undergo DNA and psychiatric tests. If convicted, he faces a maximum sentence of life without parole. The pro-migrant Italian mayor, Domenico Luciano, has been banned from staying in his city, Riace. The Italian Interior Ministry also ordered the transfer of all 200 migrants out of the town, but later said people would only be moved on a voluntary basis. Luciano has been under house arrest since early October for organizing marriages of convenience to speed up requests for asylum. His program of integrating migrants in restored houses and workshops in his dying town made the headlines.
There is this theory conveyed in central and northern Italy that refugees, deprive us of our work, bring us diseases, problems of public order, or disturb the balance of local communities with their religion. But in reality, we prove that it's exactly the opposite.
The conservative Australian state of Queensland has legalized abortion, overturning a 19th century restriction. Until now, women have used 1960s and 1970s common law rulings that allowed abortion on social, economic and medical grounds. But now, under the new law, women can ask to terminate pregnancies up to 22 weeks. Queensland's parliament passed the new law by 50 votes to 41.
In Mexico, a traditional game played with a ball on fire is helping children stay away from crime and street violence. To play pelota pure pitcher, they have to hit a fiery ball through the air with sticks, similar to lacrosse. For players in Iztapalapa, an area of Mexico City with one of the highest crime rates, it helps them to stay out of trouble. The game dates back to pre-Hispanic times as depicted in murals in the ancient city of Teotihuacan. And with that, we've come to the end of this news brief. For these and many other stories, you can find them on our website at telesiotv.net/English. And for our viewers in Africa, remember you can find us on Starsat Channel 461 in South Africa and Channel 539 in Nigeria. But you can also join us on social media because we are on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. For Telesio English, I'm Sony Gray. Thank you for watching.